Welcome back. In a previous video, we discussed what I consider to be the best and easiest explanation of THAC0, or 2-hit armor class 0 for Advanced Dungeons & Dragons 2nd edition. If you have not yet seen that video, I suggest you watch that first. To recapitulate, THAC0 is a score that every character and monster has. It represents the target number you must roll, or better, to successfully hit an enemy. With this method, you add the target's AC as a modifier to your attack die roll. Again, if you meet or exceed your THAC0, you hit. So let's talk a little bit about why you might prefer a system like THAC0 to the alternatives. First, we will dispel a couple of the common complaints about THAC0. Okay, complaint number 1. THAC0 involves too much math. If you watched the first video, it shouldn't surprise you that this is not actually true. THAC0 merely involves adding a modifier to your die roll and trying to meet or beat a target number. In fact, THAC0 arguably involves less math than some of the other systems out there. Consider the current version of Pathfinder. You can easily get a combat proficiency bonus that is in the double digits. Now add that to a die roll in the double digits, and you can see what I mean. With very little exception, THAC0 has you adding a single-digit modifier to your die roll, and those rare exceptions, it's just a nice round 10 that you'll be adding. Perhaps that is not fair though. Pathfinder is known for its crunch after all. What about the current version of Dungeons & Dragons? Yes, that is also more math-heavy than THAC0, although they hid this with a little trick. The current version of D&D incorporates a design concept called bounded accuracy that is meant to keep die roll modifiers to smaller, mostly single-digit numbers. As a result, a low-level character is not all that different from a high-level one, at least in terms of his chance to hit the target. But where does the current version of D&D then hide all of that incremental differences in power that we would expect between a beginning character and a veteran? D&D stuffs all of that power difference into hit points and damage, which means bigger numbers in the damage rolls and more involved tracking of hit points. A fighter in modern D&D has nearly double the hit points of an AD&D 2nd edition fighter. A frost giant in modern D&D attacks twice as often, and each blow does nearly twice as much damage as an AD&D 2nd edition frost giant. THAC0 keeps its modifiers in the single digits and still has much lower hit point and damage roll totals because it utilizes both positive AC modifiers and negative AC modifiers, essentially doubling the range of single-digit values. That brings us to complaint number 2. There is something unintuitive about rolling against an innate value, your own THAC0, as a target number. Moreover, it's also unintuitive that you would be adding your opponent's armor value to your attack roll. Well, I think that depends on perspective. Consider this. Have you heard the phrase, "he can't hit the broadside of a barn"? What is the AC of a barn? In a modern alternative, you would have to give the barn a low armor class, maybe a 10, so that it would be easy to beat that threshold. But I actually find this less intuitive. The barn is big. Shouldn't you get a bonus to hit it? A big modifier to add to your roll? That's what THAC0 does. You would add plus 10, because the barn is such a large, easy target. Likewise, if an enemy is foolish enough to stand unarmored, within striking distance of your weapon, you get a bonus to hit them. THAC0 doesn't represent the lowest common denominator, the chance to do something that is easy, because in combat, easy is not the norm, not the typical case. Combat is inherently difficult, and THAC0 is your chance to do something that is difficult. You are not striving solely against your target's AC, or how much it shifts a task from a baseline of what is easy to do. Rather, you are struggling against your own ability, your innate THAC0. We can qualify the task of hitting armor class 0 as something that is universally seen as difficult. Your ability to do difficult things gets better as you level. These things don't get easier, you just get better. Okay, so THAC0 makes for easier math, lets you do more with less, and provides an interesting measure for self-improvement. Let's talk about some of the other advantages that THAC0 brings. Firstly, THAC0 provides a system that is both contained and consistent. With attack and defense scores, THAC0 and AC respectively, lower is always better, just like higher is always better for combat die rolls, attacks, saving throws, and so on, and die roll bonuses. Of course, you could say much the same about modern alternatives as well, where higher is always better. What THAC0 provides, however, is a system that is both consistent and self-contained. That is, a system that has meaningful caps on values. With an ascending system, there is no real cap on how high it can go. In AD&D 2nd edition, THAC0 always ranges between 20, the worst, and 1, the best. It never falls outside of that. In a system like AD&D 2nd edition that uses the D20 at its core, there is a pleasant symmetry with having THAC0 similarly rate between 1 and 20. Secondly, THAC0 marks a distinct difference between positive and negative armor classes. The vast majority of monsters will have a positive AC, which represents different levels of mundane protection. Armor class 0 is the best protection that normal armor can possibly provide in the game, representing full plate armor and shield. Negative AC in the game is reserved for supernatural, magical, or extraordinary levels of protection. That is, negative AC is not simply a few points better than the best positive AC. Rather, negative AC is fundamentally different in some way than positive AC. If you encounter something with negative armor class, you are moving from the world of the mundane to the realm of the otherworldly. This is a marked difference over ascending systems that do not greatly differentiate categories of armor class and reduce everything into an unremarkable incremental improvement. Remember, negative AC makes an already hard thing even harder. Player characters will take pause when they encounter such dangers, and feel a sense of accomplishment if they themselves eventually achieve a negative armor class. Finally, although THAC0 is mathematically easier than the alternative, it also serves to obscure some of the mechanics that might reveal a monster's armor class to the players. With all versions of the game, the players do not typically know an enemy's armor class. But with modern versions, they can pretty quickly figure it out. If you miss with a modified roll of 27, but hit with a 28, you now know the creature has an armor class of 28. A player could also figure this out with THAC0, but it would involve some subtraction, which, in my experience, is usually enough to dissuade players from delving too much into the game mechanics, and instead just worry about the narrative of the combat. At most, working out a monster's AC in AD&D 2nd edition is just a superfluous, unnecessary step for the player, since it will occur more readily to him that he simply needs to roll higher than whatever previous roll had failed to hit the target. That is, first and foremost, players will realize how difficult it is to hit this monster. A 17 didn't do it? Maybe it's time for a tactical withdrawal. So those are just some observations on why you might prefer THAC0 over the alternatives. If you have a few ideas of your own, please feel free to put them in the comments below. Thanks for watching.